You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.
Don't you dare touch the channel or change the dial, because it's Sunday at 7 p.m. on iHeart's WRKO. I'm John Deaton, and you're listening to The Hard Truth. Listen, as usual, it's been a very busy week. We've had Trump news, obviously nationwide. We've had tragic news just take place with a shooting in an elementary church where children were praying and worshiping, and then 2 children lost their lives, 17 people injured. Our thoughts and prayers obviously go out to the families. And every week there just seems to be a lot of news. I hope everybody had a good week. Yesterday, school started for my family. My daughter, Layla, started the 1st grade. So it was a big, exciting day for the Deatons. Proud of my little girl. Can't believe that she's already 1st grader. So yes, for you out there, to remind you, I have 3 daughters. Olivia, 25, Jordan, 23, and Layla, 6. Be 7 in February. Also have a stepdaughter, Mackenzie, who's 13, and a stepson, Jackson, who's 16. So, crazy week. Listen, let's talk about some of the news, right? We've got redistricting going on across the country. We've got here in Massachusetts still a failure to comply with the audit. We've also got state employees using credit cards for luxury hotels being paid by taxpayers. John Bolton, the national security advisor under Trump's first administration, a search warrant for his home and his office. So lots of claims out there of political retribution by Trump, and that he's using lawfare and all those things. America took a 10% interest in Intel, a private company, which is crazy. So first thing I want to talk about is the audit. It is absolutely shocking that our elected officials in Massachusetts continue to violate the law. That's what they're doing. They are breaking the law. Voters put on the ballot the question of whether the state auditor, who is a Democrat, by the way, who's been on the show, Diana DeZaglio, whether that state auditor should audit the state legislature. And what that means is, where is our taxpayer dollars going? Who's getting the contracts? How many bids? Are there no bid contracts? How are things being spent by our tax dollars? It is the most fundamental thing that we have a right to. And it was on the ballot in 2024. I voted for it, and 72% of the voters voted to make it law, to make it official, that the state auditor is to audit the state legislature. Now, Attorney General Campbell approved the ballot, basically looked it over and said, yes, it meets constitutionality. It is proper to be placed on the ballot for the public to give their vote. And we did, and overwhelmingly it was voted. Yet, Karen Spilka, President of the Senate, Ron Mariano, Speaker of the House in Massachusetts, they're crooks. That's what I call them. Because they're now claiming, although the Attorney General blessed the ballot, they're claiming it's unconstitutional. that you and we don't have a right to know how our tax dollars are being spent by these career corrupt politicians. So let me make it clear. They're corrupt because there's only one reason that these officials do not want us learning how they're spending our money. It's because they don't want us to see it. They don't want us to know because they're cooking the books. They're playing with it. There's kickbacks. I guarantee you. There's no big contracts. Contracts going to donors, things of that nature. It's taking place, and they don't want you to know about it. They don't want me to know about it. And so we're going to fight. In fact, I've been talking to some taxpayers, and I'm willing to basically file a taxpayer lawsuit and sue the state legislature to comply with the law. The fact that I'm getting upset because you should be upset. The fact that the Attorney General isn't helping the state auditor is an absolute disgrace. But yeah, her and her staff, they can go to those luxury hotels and they can live high off the hog, can't they, when they're on our taxpayer dollars? The fact that Maura Healey, as governor, hasn't stepped in to force the legislature to comply with the law. It's outrageous. And all of you should be upset, and it should drive you to vote these incumbents out. When you become so arrogant that you don't believe that we have a right to know how our money's being spent, and you're so arrogant because you can just say, here's the middle finger to everyone because you're not going to vote us out. That's what they're saying to you. You're not going to vote us out. We're going to stay in power. We're going to do what we want. F you, Massachusetts voter. That's what they're saying. It's a big middle finger to all the voters and residents and citizens of this Commonwealth. So please, I hope you do what they don't think you'll do. You'll get active. You'll vote these corrupt people out. Okay, now let's talk about this real quickly, this redistricting. Now, basically, Texas is redistricting Texas, and it looks like when they're done with this redistricting that Texas will pick up 5 more congressional seats. And it appears, based on the demographics of those voters, that it is presumed that those seats would favor conservative voters, would favor Republican candidates. Therefore, the thought is that Republicans will pick up 5 seats, okay, or could pick up 5 seats. Now, understand this, that the House, and now I'm talking about the federal government, the House of Representatives, Republicans have the slightest majority since 1930s. We're talking about like 3 seats. So in the midterm elections in 2026, Congress, the House, is definitely in play. The Democrats could flip the House and gain control. So Hakeem Jeffries, right, would become the leader of the House if the Democrats flip it. Now, the Senate does not look like it's in play, meaning the Republicans would have to have an absolute disaster of a midterm election if the Senate were to flip. And the reason being is that some Democrats have resigned, retired, and now, for example, there are seats, for example, in New Hampshire. Scott Brown is running as a Republican in New Hampshire because the person who beat Scott Brown last time is retiring, and that person's a Democrat. So that was a seat that would have been secured by the Democrat comfortably, but now it's in play. It could go Republican, but there are basically, this Senate cycle, 33 seats that are up, and a lot of them are Democrats. So the chances of the Democrats flipping the Senate and gaining like 4 Senate seats is slim to none. That's the conventional wisdom. So all the focus is on the House because the Democrats can flip the House. And if they do, of course, that's going to impact President Trump because we would have divided government. And some people think that's a good thing. Some people think that's a bad thing. Obviously, President Trump thinks it's a bad thing because he wants the House and the Senate to be Republican controlled along with the presidency. And so Texas did that. Now, you should know that Illinois redistricted before in favor of the Democrats. So both sides do this redistricting. It is a fight for power. I don't like it because I believe that when politicians start drawing the lines and not voters, then you really are in jeopardy. It really is undemocratic. And the Democrats did it in Illinois, and now the Republicans are doing it in Texas. And now, of course, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, is now put an initiative on the ballot in California for them to redistrict a lot sooner than they anticipated. And normally it's done by an independent agency, but he's put 5 seats in play. So in a special election, if the voters of California approve it, then California will redistrict, and they're trying to negate what Texas is doing. And what ends up happening is a domino effect. I mean, Governor Healy in Massachusetts literally got up and said, yeah, Massachusetts might have to do that. And I spit out my coffee. I'm like, what do you mean redistrict? We don't have any Republicans in office right now in Massachusetts. Every statewide office, all 9 congressmen, both senators, Democrats. What are you going to do? I got 40% of the vote. The 40% of the people who voted for me, they don't have one Republican representative in federal government. It's insane, but that's what they do. Stick with me. We'll come back from the break. You're listening to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. Welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. Remember, you can reach the show, John at hardtruthshow.com. John at hardtruthshow.com. We're talking about the redistricting, the fact that Governor Healy was, laughable, saying that she's going to somehow redistrict Massachusetts to make it more favorable for Democrats. It couldn't be. I got 40% of the vote, yet there is not a single Republican representative or senator. I'm hoping that changes in 2026. But that's what happens. Listen, I don't like all this stuff because we already are so divided in this country. We already have election integrity issues in this country. People don't trust the electoral process. When people lose faith that their vote doesn't count, then democracy loses, right? Our constitutional republic, because that's what we have. We technically don't have a democracy. Democracy is majority rule, technically. We have a constitutional republic. That's why we have the Electoral College. But it would be in jeopardy when the public loses faith that their vote doesn't count. And so I don't like all this, but the fact that you have someone like Maura Healey, trying to get involved and be relevant in this discussion is laughable. Okay, let's move on to another subject. A lot of people in the media, especially on the left, are saying that this raid, the search warrant on John Bolton's residence and his office is political revenge by President Trump. People are outraged about it. I'm watching people who cheered when President Trump's Mar-a-Lago was raided by the FBI because of classified documents, because they said President Trump was hoarding classified documents. When that happened, everybody cheered it. They said, nobody's above the law. This is great. John Bolton got on TV, who was the national security advisor under Trump. He got on TV saying, cheered, celebrated it. Now, here's the truth, because this is the hard truth. Let me tell you what the truth is. The truth is that John Bolton and Trump had a falling out. John Bolton was national security advisor. John Bolton wanted Trump to bomb Iran. I mean, he's talked about even nukes, right? To get rid of Iran, just wipe them completely out. That's his stance. It's always been his stance. He's a warmonger. And Trump didn't go that way. Trump is more transactional in his foreign policy. What can America get in the deal with Canada, with the UK, with Australia, with Russia, whatever? Trump is a businessman. He's transactional, right? The art of the deal. He just wants to cut a deal. Bolton doesn't like that. So they had a falling out. Bolton says he resigned. Trump says he fired him. And then Bolton, but this is what happened. Bolton wrote a book called The Room in Which It Happened, and he disclosed classified information about the Ukraine war, about North Korea. But while he was national security advisor under Trump, he sent sensitive classified information to family members via a private server, not a government server. So the Trump administration, the first time, had tried to stop his book and stop the classified information, and a federal judge allowed it, but did say that Bolton likely violated national security. And so we have one federal judge saying Bolton mishandled classified information. Listen, all of these people do it. Hillary Clinton and her 33,000 emails and wiping the phones and destroying the phones and all these other people. Trump took classified information. Biden had classified information in his garage that Hunter Biden had access to. Hunter Biden was a crackhead. I'm not saying it to be mean. That's a fact. He was a crackhead. And so you had a crackhead who was going in and out of the garage where all this classified information was. And it was there for years. So all of these people do it. And Bolton did it too. And Trump had a criminal investigation. But then the 2020 election happened. Biden became the president. And guess what he does? He dropped the criminal probe against Bolton, but reduced it to a civil fine. Bolton had to pay a couple $1 million in royalties. And then looks like they almost cut a deal, because then Bolton went on national TV and started bad-mouthing Trump in every situation he could, called Trump stupid, called Trump incoherent, didn't know what he was doing, all these things. And so then the classified raid on Mar-a-Lago, and they all celebrated. Well, Trump wins 2024, and Kash Patel asked what happened to the Bolton investigation, found out that the Biden administration had dropped the criminal probe, so he redid it. But here's what needs to know, is that the first judge said that Bolton violated national security, mishandled classified information, and he leaked information. And then a second judge authorized a search warrant. So it's not like Trump said, go raid his office and home, and they did. A federal judge had to find probable cause that they would find evidence in Bolton's home, in his office, and that's what happened. So there's real meat on the bones as it relates to Bolton, and we've got to do something with these people, the way they handle and mishandle classified information, okay? So I believe he'll be indicted by a grand jury, and he'll have a trial, and whether he gets convicted or not, who knows? But that's really, I think, what's going to end up happening with Bolton. And but these claims that, hey, this is just political retribution, maybe it is a little bit, but that doesn't change the facts that Bolton did do this stuff, okay? And when you turn classified sensitive information over via private server, not a government server, you actually could be in violation of the Espionage Act. And so serious stuff. We've got to protect our national security. And so I support the fact that in this case, they move forward. I don't view it as strictly political retribution myself. Okay. What else happened big in the last week since we talked? Well, Trump federalized the police in the District of Columbia. And he can do that for 30 days, and he put some National Guard out on the streets of our nation's capital. And a lot of people are taking issue with this. A lot of political pundits, a lot of political experts are upset. They're saying that this is uncalled for, that the crime rate was down, that this is political theater. Governor Healy called it political theater. But you want to know who welcomes it? The residents. You have people literally putting TikToks out there. There was a guy, he was a black guy, he was wearing all his bling, he had his jewelry on, and he was like, this is the safest the city's ever been. I can walk blocks and no one's gonna try to steal my Rolex or my necklace. You had other residents celebrating that they can walk their dog because, listen, the murder rate is pretty high in the nation's capital. We've got to go back to some law and order in this country. Now, I don't think this can be sustained. Trump can do it for 30 days, and then under the law, Congress has to enact it. But the residents are welcoming it. And so that's what I want to focus on because we have a public safety crisis in this country. In Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit, Louisiana, there's crime rampant. Listen, in Boston, Mayor Wu's walking around saying that Boston is the safest city in the world. Listen, you've got open drug use going on in mass and cash. You've got these zombies that just stand there. They're drugged out on fentanyl or whatever, and they just stand there. If you go in Boston Commons, you can see drug needles on the ground. And so the crime has ticked up. And so we've got to get back to a law and order kind of situation because an elected leader's number one obligation, other than following the Constitution, is public safety. And people need to feel safe to walk down the streets of Boston or the Commons or anyone else. So I just make that distinction because I agree that if we don't want to see Marines and soldiers and National Guard in camouflage, like just, walking our streets, we don't want to look like we're under martial law. I get all that. I agree with all that. But at the same time, we got to focus on law and order and establishing safety for our streets. And so always ask this question: what are the residents? Are they welcoming this? Not the political experts. Okay. Now, another issue is I think Trump's frustrated related to the Ukraine war. I think he genuinely is surprised that he has not been able to negotiate a settlement between Zelensky and between Putin. And I know he wants to, and I think he genuinely wants to because I think he genuinely hates war. I think when he talks about 1 million people dying and casualties combined, that bothers him. I think he detests war. People should detest war. That's an admirable thing. And I also think selfishly he wouldn't mind getting the Nobel Peace Prize if he was able to negotiate a settlement. And many people believe if he does negotiate a settlement between Zelensky and Putin, that he would be deserving of the Nobel Peace Prize. They've given it away to other people. So I'm sure that's part of his motivation, but I do think he sincerely wants to do it, and he's frustrated. And when we come back from the break, we'll talk why this is such a difficult situation to solve, this war. You listen to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. Welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. Before the break, we were talking about Ukraine and Russia and the fact that President Trump has not been able to negotiate a settlement. and that I do think that it's causing the president to have a certain frustration. I think he's going to have frustration with Zelensky. I think he's going to have frustration with Putin. I think he's had frustration with Putin because before he met with Putin, Trump was calling for um, a basically put the weapons down, right? A ceasefire. That's the words I was trying to think of, and I couldn't. A ceasefire. That's the first step. Whenever you're talking about negotiating a peace deal, put the guns down, stop killing each other. So I agree with President Trump, and Zelensky called for a ceasefire, but Putin didn't. And there's a very specific reason that Putin didn't. Putin's winning. And there's a lot of people that don't want to tell you that. But Russia currently is in control of 20%, so 1/5, 20% of all Ukraine land and territory, right? Obviously, they annexed Crimea in 2014 under Barack Obama. Now they're partially in control of some of the best areas where you have the industrial base of Ukraine. You have rare minerals, all of those things. And so Putin, a ceasefire doesn't help him. He's making advancements on the ground. The battlefield is edged in Putin's favor right now. So it makes sense from a strategic standpoint. Now, I'm not talking about a moral standpoint. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about from a pure militaristic strategic standpoint. Why would you want to give up the edge on the battlefield? That's your leverage, right? And so I think Trump got a little confused by that, or at least surprised that Putin wouldn't even entertain a ceasefire. Zelensky, it's all about survival at this point. Ukraine's losing. Americans are exhausted from funding foreign wars. Europeans are going to get more and more exhausted about funding a non-ending forever war. And Zelensky senses that, and he needs the money, and he needs weapons. And so there's a big incentive for him to want the ceasefire. Now, the other thing is Putin isn't budging, right? He's keeping Crimea. Zelensky says he's got to give Crimea back. So there's going to be no deal until Zelensky accepts the fact that Russia's not giving Crimea back. It was taken in 2014 under Obama. He's not going to turn around a decade after having it and say, okay, here, you can have it back. It's just never going to happen. The other thing that's never going to happen, and Trump made this clear, is that Ukraine is not going to become a member of NATO, period. There are several things in order for a deal to take place that needs to be done, okay? Several things. And think about this. We have spent $300 billion, right? $300 billion, and there's a stalemate at best, except Russia's winning. And we could spend another $400 billion, and it's going to be the same situation, okay? But in order for a deal to happen, this is what I believe, and I wrote it down. No NATO membership. Ukraine will not host NATO bases within Ukraine, and they will not host certain weapons systems that could reach Moscow and threaten Russia even more. I think in order for Trump to get a deal, in addition to those things, Putin's going to want sanctions lifted from America off Russia. And then the final thing is the land situation. They're going to have to agree that Russia is going to keep Crimea. And the question is Russia going to just leave it at Crimea? And I think where Trump's going to have to do his negotiation is with those sanctions and try to convince Putin that all he gets is Crimea and America lifts sanctions and he gets the fact that they're not a member of NATO and no bases will be in Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. Because Trump's going to want those minerals for America to be repaid. There's no doubt. And I think Zelensky's going to have to accept the fact that the best deal he can get is guarantees by the United States that if Russia invades again, we'll supply weapons to be paid for by other nations like Europe. Okay. And that Russia gives back all the other land it took except for Crimea. I mean, I think that's really what it's going to come down to. Reach me at john@hardtruthshow.com, john@hardtruthshow.com, and let me know what you think. Let me know if you think that my suggestions are out of line or whatever. And like I said, maybe I'll get you on the show and we could talk about it. But listen, 1 million people have been killed or wounded, and we got to bring an end to this. European leaders want this to come to an end as well because they're paying more of their fair share of the war now than they were before. In fact, they have to purchase the weapons from American contractors. We're not just giving those weapons anymore. And so this is going to affect their economies. Second of all, they want assurances that Russia isn't going to invade any other areas within Europe, okay? In addition to that, you got all these refugees, war refugees that are displaced, that are looking to move into Europe. So it's a real problem. And, I don't think it's going to end soon. Trump's going to need to get Zelensky and Putin in a room together and just say no one's leaving until we have a deal, okay? So that's the Ukraine war. Now, unfortunately, we got to talk about something that is tragic, and that is shooting in Minneapolis. 2 children are dead, 17 are wounded, and I got to tell you, some disturbing stuff has happened. So this tragedy related to the shooting in this church of children, it turns out that the shooter, who is dead, was found dead by a self-inflicted gun wound, was a transgender person. Now, this is going to trigger 2 things. It's going to trigger the conversation on trans, and then it's going to trigger guns. And you're going to have cause for, obviously, gun control across the nation, another example, and you're going to have a more heated debate related to the trans issue. And the reason I say that is because there have been several trans individuals who have engaged in these kind of mass shootings. But I was watching CNN, or I was on X, and something popped up that just disgusts me. It disgusts me. And it just shows you how crazy our society has become. This is Jake Tapper of CNN. Check this out.
Another piece of the puzzle as to who the shooter was. The Minneapolis Star Tribune says, according to court records, because there's been some confusion about what the shooter's name was.
Yes.
Robin Westman's mother applied to change her child's name in 2019. It was at one point Robert Paul Westman.
Correct.
But since she identifies as a female and wants her name to reflect that identification, was underage, it's now Robin.
I mean, Jake Tapper just went out of his way to say, we got to get the name right. Is it Robert or is it Robin? Because we don't want to misidentify a killer of children. God forbid that we mis-ID this trans person who's dead, who killed 2 children, injured 17 others, as they prayed to God. God forbid if we get the name wrong. The level of wokeness that has taken place in this country is shocking to me. And I am not the most, I supported gay marriage before Barack Obama, before Hillary Clinton. I said we live in America free. I'm for civil rights, man. I'm for gay rights. But they've gotten to this level of wokeness that is absurd. Shame on Jake Tapper. Let's not misidentify the killer. It's insane, man. I'm telling you, it's insane. And the New York Times does an article, and the one thing they leave out is that this person happened to be trans. And now you have the mayor of Minneapolis out there saying nobody better talk about trans people and use this tragedy as a way to denigrate the trans community. But you want to know what they won't talk about? They won't talk about the fact that this individual, this trans individual, had written a manifesto that he was tired of being trans. In his words, he said, I wished I wouldn't have been brainwashed. I mean, those were his words. So arguably, his trans issue in this crisis was a contributing factor to his murderous impulses. It's crazy, but we can't talk about it. You listen to The Hard Truth. All right, welcome back to the show. You listen to The Hard Truth. I'm John Deaton. So let's just pray for the families of the victims of this shooting. This is going to spark a debate about gun control in the country, mental health, whether trans it's a mental health issue or not a mental health issue. People are going to, not want to discuss the fact that this person not only was struggling with her identity, but was upset and regretted the transition. And I can tell you that this is going to be a topic of the 2026 elections. In the gubernatorial race, in the Senate race, and the senator up for re-election in Massachusetts is Senator Ed Markey. Many of you know that Ed Markey has been in Washington, D.C. for 50, not 15 people, 50 years. He went to Washington in 1976. Jimmy Carter was running for president and won and became the president. And Ed Markey has outlasted Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H. Bush, the senior, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Trump 1, Biden, Trump 2. 50 years, half a century. And he's up for re-election. And you can't get any more left than this guy. Yes, he's someone who supports biological men competing against women. Now, he doesn't have any kids. He doesn't have 3 daughters like I have. Layla is starting softball next week. And she's going to do other sports, no doubt. I taught and was the coach for my daughter's basketball team. And so I'm all for fairness. And because I'm for fairness, I don't support biological men competing against women, especially in sports and especially combat sports, okay? And so that doesn't make me transphobic. It just makes me common sense. Okay, now I'm going to read an email from one of you. This is from Sarah. Sarah Newton asked, John, are you going to run for public office again? And if you do, what office would you consider governor? And so when I ran against Elizabeth Warren, listen, everybody, I knew what the odds were. It was February 1st of 2024. No one was stepping up. Elizabeth Warren is a fraud. She's always been a fraud. And I'm not even talking about her heritage. That's just one example of her being a fraud. I'm talking about she claims to be against the banks when the banks support her. Her bill against crypto was written by the banks. She pretends to be for poor people, but her policies crush poor people. She wanted to ban Bitcoin. And so I just said, you know what? I'm going to get in the race. I didn't necessarily think that, it was a career path or anything like that. I knew what the odds were. And I got 40%. No one knew who I was when I started, but 1.3 million voters voted for me. And I do want to make a difference. I know that my independence and my lack of loyalty to a party or a person, my loyalty to America and to Massachusetts would guide me to make the right decisions. And so I think I would be good at it, certainly better than Ed Markey or Elizabeth Warren. I'm not going to run for governor. That's for sure. We have Brian Shortsleeve, who was on the show, Mike Keneally, who's been on this show. They're running for governor as Republicans. And there's a third party person who hasn't announced yet, but I believe he will announce, Mike McNogue, a self-funder. And so you're going to have three credible Republicans running in a Republican primary to take on Maura Healey. I'm not going to add a fourth person to that. Even if I thought I could win, I wouldn't at this point. But the question is, would I consider running against Ed Markey? And the Boston Herald interviewed me, and I said that if it was Markey, for sure, and I thought I could raise money, and I would, as long as I wasn't going against, if the President Trump didn't want me to run because he's in charge of the Republican Party and picked someone else, I could beat him. Don't get me wrong. I'm a competitive guy. I got 65% of the vote last time with 3 people on the ballot, 2 other people on the ballot, one who was a big Trump supporter, and I crushed them. So I could beat it, but it's not a recipe for winning because, unfortunately, in Massachusetts, it's a very incumbent-friendly system. The primary is September 3rd. That gives you 8 weeks after you win the primary to try to win the general against an incumbent who's well-funded, like Elizabeth Warren or an Ed Markey. So if you spend all your time and your money and your energy to win the primary, you could be out of money, and all you've been doing is trying to win over Republicans. You're not talking to lifelong Democrats. You're not talking to independents who, if they got to know me, would not be able to have trust in me. They could say, hey, the Boston Globe is not a bastion of conservatism. They called me a reasonable alternative to Elizabeth Warren. So, I would think about taking on Ed Markey because he is the epitome of what's wrong in this country. This man has been in office for 50 years, and he talks nonsense. He says the same old stuff. Medicare for all. It's not going to happen. 187 million people in America have private insurance. 70% of them are very happy. They're not going to give up their private insurance to try a government-run, one bill fit all kind of approach like Canada or other places have, where you have to wait 6 months to get an MRI. It's not going to happen. But that's what he does. He gets up and says, the Green New Deal, the Green New Deal. It's never going to happen. It's a fantasy sprinkled with unicorn dust. It's not going to happen. And these alternative energy mandates are crushing working people. And they think the answer is off wind shore. Are you kidding me? It's not enough. The Green New Deal and Markey's energy plan actually causes us to be more dependent on fossil fuels. Ed Markey once said that coal, which is the dirtiest of all fossil fuels, that coal was a lesser evil than nuclear. Do you know how out of touch you have to be to say that? We have these small nuclear module reactors now that can be placed on 1 or 2 acres that are zero carbon emissions that will power 350,000 homes. So we should have limited nuclear small nodules at certain locations in Massachusetts as part of a multifaceted energy transition approach. But Markey just wants to talk pie in the sky nonsense. So it'd be a fantasy to get on the stage with that guy. I think he wouldn't be ready for someone like me, if you want me to be honest. And listen, a poll showed that I could win. There was a poll done in February, people that want me to run. It showed that I could beat Markey between 5 and 7 points. Now, a Republican hasn't beat a sitting Democrat in Massachusetts over 100 years. And so, but it can be done. And after that poll that showed that I could beat Markey, the Democrats did a poll on who could primary Markey. And they listed all of the Democrats in Congress, Seth Moulton, Jake Auchincloss, Lori Trahan, all of them. Guess what, everybody? Guess who's the only one that beat Markey in a primary? Ayanna Pressley. That's how left you got to be, man, to win a Democratic primary in Massachusetts. So Markey, he got on stage against Joe Kennedy and argued over which one of them was more pro-Black Lives Matter, which one of them was more pro-reparations. I threw up in my mouth because Markey actually fought busing. The very first reparations in this country was black kids being bused to white schools. And Markey fought against it. He didn't want it. He said, keep the black people in the hood. Right? He's all for black people, just not in his neighborhood, not in his schools. He's a hypocrite. He's a political opportunist. He was pro-life. He wanted a constitutional amendment to ban abortion. Then he decided to run for Senate, looked at the polls in Massachusetts, realized that 70 to 80% of Massachusetts voters support a woman's choice for an abortion. All of a sudden, he became pro-abortion. Right? He became pro-choice now, right? Because he looked at a poll. He was part of the fossil fuel industry, but he latched on to AOC and the Green New Deal because he wanted to stay relevant. Again, a guy who said coal was better than nuclear. And so, I'm thinking about it. I mean, this guy's never lives in Massachusetts anymore. I've lived in Roxbury, East Boston, Malden, Swansea, Bolton. I've been a lawyer here for 25 years. Markey couldn't be a judge. I could. He couldn't be a judge in Massachusetts because we require mandatory retirement at age 70. And so I think Markey's so far left that he's beatable. 50 years is way too long. I'm thinking about it. John at hardtruthshow.com. John at hardtruthshow.com. Tell me what you think. I'll see you next week.
You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.